Hey guys, RJ here, and after a lot of build-up going on in weeks 1 and 2 of Big Little Lies, I'd say we got a ton of payoff in this episode, and there were a lot of things to take in, so let's just go ahead and dive right into our episode 3 review of Big Little Lies. As always, guys, if you have not seen episode 3 of Big Little Lies on HBO, please turn off this review, go watch it, come back here, and then we can talk about it. So with that out of the way, let's just go ahead and dive right into this. The opening scene is one where we get a lot of introspection with a very open shot where you have Jane Chapman staring out at the sea, and then Ziggy ends up waking her up saying, I think it's time to go eat dinner. And I kind of knew that this episode was going to be pretty foreboding after that. So then we move on to, we get the Regina thing where she's talking about Annabelle or her party, and, Chloe's not going to come, and she's really upset by it. And I love the dad in this, Gordon. He is like spot on, one of my favorite characters. He brings a sort of like dad feel to this show that I'm not really getting as much from other characters. I think he kind of embodies, like, he'll go over and smoke a cigarette during the party, come back over, his wife will yell at him. I think they're very like kind of the prototypical like couple, like, get mad at each other and stuff. I like the way that he feeds in, because I'm really not that big a fan of Renata Klein. I mean, maybe that's just me, but so far in this show, I'm definitely on the Team Reese side. So Madeline is by far my chick for this. I'm not a big fan of Renata, and I just, she kind of pushes me the wrong way. I think Gordon really pulls in the balance for her as a character, and he does a really good job of acting in this so far too. So he kind of tries to push it aside, and they end up having sex in his office later on in this episode. I thought they kind of threw in some of their relationships to surround the crazy relationships and all of the crazy moving parts that we have. If you notice throughout this episode, it's kind of like cut into little pieces surrounded by Renata and Gordon trying to, they're doing normal couple things. What normal is, that's very like in the eye of the beholder, but they're fighting about, stupid things like maybe her daughter should see a psychiatrist or something like that. And they're having like normal person fights, when then you contrast that with the Celeste Wright, Perry Wright relationship, the Jane Chapman history that we'll get at the end, and the Madeline stuff and her daughter. There's just so much character building for all of these separate relationships, and then they're kind of encapsulated by this very normal relation. This, I would almost call it healthy, or at least it seems healthy so far with Renata and Gordon. So I just want to touch on that. There's nothing really super interesting about that storyline in this plot, like in the overarching so far. Maybe it'll come into play down the road, but at least so far, there's nothing that we really care about for Renata and Gordon until we actually find out if they're involved with what happens at the end of the season. So guys, before we get into the really serious stuff of this episode, and there is a ton of it, don't get me wrong, I wanted to hit on some of the funny parts of this episode, and kind of wanted to start with the birthday party when you have Renata and Bonnie dancing with each other, and you hear through the investigators, we're viewing this through the eyes of the main investigator of this, and she's like interviewing all these people, and you hear all of the wives of the husbands that are at this party, and they're like, yeah, and then Bonnie started dancing with Renata, and I did not like that very much. And I just love all of the hate in their voices, because like the Bonnie Renata dance does get like a little bit sensual, and I'm like, isn't this like a kindergarten or first grade birthday party? Like, what are you people doing dancing under this tent with children watching you? And like, whatever, to each their own, but I just thought it was a little weird, and I guess that's the size and scope of children's birthday parties nowadays. I remember I had 6 kids going to Laser Quest back in the day, so props to her for getting those Frozen baskets out to her friends. But I gotta give a shout out to the girl from The Office. Pretty much, she quotes when they're dancing and stuff, and you see all the dads like sliding down their shades to stare at Bonnie, and you hear in the background she quotes like, "I saw erections." So I thought that was nailed. I like the comedy that they kind of spruced in with this, and those were some really good moments. But let's just go ahead and move on to the serious stuff. So this show has surprised me multiple times by tackling really dark and kind of off-hinder topics that most TV shows will not go into. And I think this kind of speaks to the fact that HBO gives true creative freedom to those that are directing these shows. And I know that this is based off a book, but a lot of these things do not get picked up for TV when there are scenes like what we are seeing on TV. So I got to give it to them. There's a lot of really dark stuff going on. So let's just kind of dive into the Perry Wright Celeste relationship they end up going to counseling because at the beginning of this episode, he once again, he basically lays his hands on her. He basically strangles her for a little while. And yeah, that's not okay. And she ends up telling it to him. I think it kind of takes her a little bit longer than she would have wanted, but you can tell that she she even threatens him. She says, I am going to leave you if you touch me again. And I think there is some really interesting parts of this relationship, and I think HBO is kind of wanting us to only hate Skarsgård, like as if there's nothing that Celeste Wright has done wrong. And I mean, obviously nobody deserves what she is getting. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that perhaps there are some parts of this relationship that we are kind of underestimating, like the part where she doesn't invite him to the Disney on Ice. And I'm not saying that deserves for him to choke her. I'm saying that, maybe she really is trying to pull his strings and get him to lash out. There's a lot of things that HBO could do with this. If it really is just him just like beating on her. I mean, that obviously she talks to the counselor and she's like, they end up kind of admitting, even though it takes them quite a few minutes to get it out, like they're sitting there on the couch and eventually, they talk about passion, they talk about violence and how their arguments get really heated. And I'm like, are they eventually just going to like come out and say it like he actually hits her? And that's what ends up happening. I was actually really surprised. I thought we'd at least be a few more episodes before we get a public admission of guilt. But the way he admits it is very much a signal, at least in my mind, that he's not actually guilty, or he doesn't feel guilty. I think he feels like, she's driving him to do this, and nobody ever drives someone to hurt someone else physically like this. I don't care what you do. I mean, there's no call for this kind of thing in a relationship. Pretty much at the end of the day, no matter what Celeste Wright is doing, there is no call for this. And I mean, it's weird the way he kind of tries to turn it around on her, saying like, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. Who wouldn't want to have you? I'm always afraid of losing you. And while that is a very powerful thought, that doesn't give you the right to lash out at your wife. Absolutely under no circumstances. So, yeah, I think we got a lot of kind of insight into his character a little bit more, because the more and more we find out about him, the more and more I hate him. And how fucking dare you touch Nicole Kidman? Moving on to our next big topic is basically we end up finding out that Abigail wants to move out of Madeline's house. She no longer wants to live with her and Ed and Chloe. And this ends up being kind of a big surprise resolution to me, because we end up finding out about the Celeste Perry thing in the first episode. And obviously we get some tension between Abigail and her mother throughout these first two episodes. But in this third episode, I find it very strange that she kind of flips a switch, going from like, you're all up in my grill and I can't deal with you. I don't want to choose a college yet. That kind of like normal teenage stuff, to immediately like, I need to move out. You're smothering me, etc. I feel like she's being pushed. And here's why. And this is one of my small theories for this episode. I think that teacher that's teaching at the high school is actually one of Bonnie's yoga students or something. I don't know what the connection might be, but they both, like, Abigail and the teacher both bring up her spiritual needs, and that seems like a very Bonnie, Nathan type thing to me. And the way that Bonnie and Nathan were acting during this whole thing is just like screaming bullshit to me. So on top of that, let's talk about the number one cringe scene you will ever see like in the next year. And that is Bonnie Carlson hugging Madeline McKenzie. Okay, her going up and hugging. I sat there like, oh my God, like, could you even imagine, like, your child just chose to live with this family over you? And I mean, I've actually had one of these conversations with one of my parents back way when I was young. So it's not an easy thing for either side to do, but the fact that the opposing parent dared come up and like tried to console her when really I think that there's something else going on there, I thought it was a little bit ridiculous. I could see like the anger in Ed's eyes towards Nathan. I kind of like that a lot. I kind of hope Adam Scott ends up punching him by the end of this season. That would be like best ending for Adam Scott possible in this show. Yeah, so I thought that was super cringeworthy, the fact that Bonnie did that. And I really don't like the way that Nathan is like asking Madeline, like, oh, that's very mature of you. Like, you have any room to freaking talk when you abandoned your wife 15 years ago? So, yeah, there's a lot of like, basically a lot of moments in here where I really feel for Madeline McKenzie. She's kind of, her whole world is kind of like falling down, like not falling, but definitely starting to tip in a depressing direction. Her play is getting canceled. We talk about the Jane stuff here in a minute. and her daughter basically said, "You're smothering me, and I can't live with you anymore, so I'm going to go live with my dad, whom you hate with a burning passion." So yeah, I don't really think it can get that much worse for Madeline at this point. I guess we'll have to kind of see. Maybe she can dig herself out of this rut. But that scene where she pulls over in the car at the end of the episode after she hears Jane's story and everything kind of hits her, and she just breaks down, and I can't blame her after hearing that and everything else that's going on in her life. But yeah, they absolutely nailed these scenes, especially the ones where she's with the teacher, where she's agitated and dealing with Nathan and Bonnie. Reese Witherspoon, you did an absolutely amazing job with these scenes. So guys, moving on to what I would consider the darkest part of this episode and the part that we learned the most about a character probably in the show so far. Jane Chapman ends up telling Madeline McKenzie that her son, Ziggy, was conceived during a rape. And we get this scene beginning while she's telling the story to Madeline, and we finally get a context clue of the shades coming down, why that sound effect has been used so much. So whomever she's with in this scene, and we do have a lot of theories, which we will bring out a video probably in the next couple of days on who we think is the person, because we do have a good idea of who it is. Pretty much the shades come down, and, you know, Jane Chapman had gone up drunk, you know, kind of with this guy, flirting and stuff, and they met at a bar, and I'm pretty sure it was gonna end in consensual sex before all this happens. So this is definitely like a dude that rapes people, wants the control thing going on. And yeah, this scene was really, really hard for me to watch. There were at tears filling up. I wasn't comfortable. I'm barely even comfortable making a video talking about this. This is a very tense subject, and I think HBO kind of nailed a lot of the feelings that maybe some victims might feel, and I'm not even going to put that out there for others, but I mean, they like the way that they shoot it, where she is watching herself and she's sitting on the toilet and she sees what he's doing, and she sees like herself, like an image of herself, and the visuals that we get when she's leaving the hotel and the lights are above her and like the ocean's still dark and stuff. And God, I mean, just the scene in general, it was so hard to watch. This guy was just like, she explained it best. He was mechanical, and he just, you know, she thought he was going to kill her if she tried to resist. And I can't even imagine that situation, even in the slightest. So the fact that she ends up telling Madeline this, you know, shows that she does trust her. It explains a lot as to why we don't know about Ziggy's dad. We explains why we have all these visions. And speaking of visions, that scene where they make it almost seem like the guy that raped her is breaking into her home. She's having like, you know, like a PTSD flashback pretty much. And he's trying to break in. He breaks her windows, and then she turns around and shoots him with the gun. Yeah, that whole scene freaked the crap out of me. I didn't know that was just some, you know, weird flashback she was having. I thought maybe that time was the real time finally. It wasn't. So I don't know if that's like just still foreshadowing something to come, or if it's just playing on her fears. But yeah, she opens up to Madeline, and it's one of the saddest things I think I've ever seen on television, and it pushed this episode from like really good to above amazing. I mean, I haven't seen something that kind of hit me like this in a really long time. There are a lot of emotions flying around in this scene, and I really like the way that the two Jane and Madeline play off one another. You know, Madeline's trying to hold it together while her friend is explaining something that she's never told anyone else, and I think she does a pretty good job for, you know, given the circumstance. But it gives us so much more context, and like I said, I'm pretty sure we actually know who it is, and we will have a theory video coming out about this, but I really don't want to talk about this anymore because it's already making me uncomfortable, so let's just kind of get into the wrap-up then. Whew, man, that was a lot of shit to talk about. So let's just get back to some jovial stuff. The music for this episode was terrific. You had Fleetwood Mac going on when they were in the bus on the way to Disney on Ice or whatever. The music going on at the party while Renata and Bonnie were dancing. I mean, there was a lot of good music, just like there has been so far in this show. I really liked the visuals that we got too. The Jane stuff, obviously, all the visuals for those scenes. The shoes that we get, where we finally get the explanation of the sand prints, the scene of her walking into the ocean, that end scene, and you know, it's just it it's amazing to me that there were no words in that scene, but yet I felt some of the strongest emotions of the show so far. So that goes to show you that the director of this show knows exactly what they're doing. So credits to that. The visuals, once again, are spot on, and so are the audio tracks for this show. I love the intro still. I listen to it every time, and yeah, just keep the great soundtrack playing going. It's been fantastic so far, so no complaints there. And just overall, as a summary for the whole episode, it was terrific. This is one of the best period television shows I have seen in a mystery, murder, gossipy type show like ever. I mean, that's hands down. I think by the end of this season, this show is going to cement itself in history of being one of the better gossipy, not true detective, but more like murder mystery shows. And yeah, I'm excited to see where they go from here. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. This video was a little bit harder for me to do, but I'm still glad I did it. Comment down below. I want to know your theories. Tell me, who do you think the Jane Chapman person could be? Is it someone you already know in the show? Is it someone that's still yet to come into the storyline? Let me know your thoughts down below. Please do not go anywhere dark with the comments. That'll get you banned. But like this video if you liked it. Dislike it if you absolutely hated me and you never want me to review anything ever again. Subscribe to this channel. That helps us out the most. And until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.